As a good friend would say, it's Tuesday, so you know what that means. But let me tell you this. We've talked about the big gold versus the world, but there's another belt that has built legends in this industry. And I'm going to give you a hit. Let's get to it. Or maybe not. Welcome to the Wrestling Realm Presents Championship Culture. And this is season 2. Now, before we get into today's content, because I promise you, we're going to get to today. But got to remind you of a couple quick things. Did you know that you can watch all of the Wrestling Realm content at any time just by going over to youtube.com/the Wrestling Realm? And this includes all 25 episodes of season 1 of Championship Culture. And we even threw in a bonus episode for you. So when you get a chance, go on over to youtube.com/wrestling room and check out all of the playlists for Championship Culture and all things wrestling. Now, don't forget that you can follow us on all social media platforms, which include Threads, X, and Facebook, just by using the handle @Wrestling Realm. And if you want to follow Championship Culture, check us out on Instagram @championshipculture_. Once again, Instagram is championshipculture_. Don't forget to like and subscribe and engage in the conversation. Because trust me, when we talk about all things wrestling, we talk about all things wrestling, and Championship Culture talks about them championship belts. Now, if you can download all of our audio content anytime just by going to Anchor, Stitcher, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. And don't forget to watch our Twitch channel just by using @the Wrestling Realm. Now, summer is starting to, well, it's still kind of spring. We about to go into summer because, if you live in Baltimore, the weather will have you forgetting what season it is. But just in time for that, let the guys at the Wrestling Room save you some money on any kind of live shows, sporting events, concerts, and more. All you got to do is head over to SeatGeek.com and you can save $20 on any purchase of $50 or more. Once again, just go over to SeatGeek.com, use the promo code Wrestling Round, and it will save you 50 on any purchase of $50. It will save you $20, and it's a one-time code. We'll use that email, but a cheat code might be just use a different email the next time you want to use it. But trust me, SeatGeek.com and the guys at the Wrestling Room are here to save you some money. So with all that being said, from the title of the show, well, yes, see, this is what I was making reference to, people. It must be Tuesday because look who it is. And then, what's going on, Mike? How are you feeling tonight? I figured you would join tonight. And then, check this out. Prototype, I'm glad that you can join us. And I promise you, we're going to be chilling for a little while, but we got a lot to get into today. And in order to get into this today, if you've ever watched any of the flagship show, the Wrestling Room Now podcast on Wednesday, if you ever watched Championship Culture on Tuesdays, if you ever been in any belt group, if you've been on any part of social media, there's a constant historian, I'm going to call him, that always is ready to give you the facts, the rundown, some of the history, some of the tidbits, some of those things that you might not know because he's kind of like a expert in that era. It's a few guys that are credible when it comes to this, and he's definitely one of them. So today, I'm going to say this. The guys at Championship Culture would like to welcome. You've seen him in the comments before. He's, I'm going to say, the NWA expert, the territory expert. Without further ado, let's bring in Dennis King so that way he can get this conversation started tonight. So there he is, the man himself.
Hey, what's up,
going
everybody?
on, sir?
How y'all doing?
Mike, I'm glad you enjoyed that, but trust me, if you stick around, we're gonna need your comments. So, Dennis, what's going on, sir? Tell the people who you are and tell them who Dennis is because we see you in the comments. So the prototype might be a little mad because he's in the comments tonight, but he got plenty of people, and I see you in there. And I heard that's why we delayed the show to start because we want to make sure everybody got to see that opening match. But trust me,
Yeah,
it's on fire, just like that Phoenix in the intro. Dennis,
right.
tell the people who you are.
Well, I'm Dennis King, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. So of course I grew up on Memphis wrestling and the territories. Um, Anybody know anything about the territories? In Memphis, it was part of the Jarrett's wrestling. Jerry Jarrett, who was Jeff Jarrett's father, his territory, and also Jerry Lawler. Um, I've been a wrestling fan since I was a kid, watching wrestling with my grandparents, and every Saturday morning we watched it. Friday nights, whenever it was on, the family was around watching it. So we're here to talk about wrestling.
So let me just hear you correctly. You grew up during the territory time.
Yeah, the back end of
Okay.
it, the
Let me
back
say the
end.
territory started about what, 1960? All the
Yeah,
way
but
to
toward the mid '80s is when it started dying off, and Crockett started buying up all the other territories like the Central States, which was highly racist area, Florida, which was a dead, what that a lot of people fail to realize. One of the biggest mistakes Jim Crockett Promotions made was they took on too much when they started buying all those other territories. But that's another discussion for another day.
so oftentimes the 10 pounds of gold, Sweet Charlotte, the you know, whatever you want to call that belt, you can't talk about that without talking about certain wrestlers. But a lot of
Right.
people seem to forget that before they held the big gold, you got to talk about a belt that has probably an identity crisis, but a belt that has a lot of combinations, a lot of unifications. And I'm talking
Hmm.
about, let me just show the people what I'm talking about. So before we get to the 10 pounds of gold, I'm going to talk about this here belt right here. So this is the NWA Television Heavyweight Championship, right? And its lineage dates back all the way to 1969, right?
Right.
But when this particular belt became, and I have two different versions, the one on a black stripe, one on red. But when this belt first was introduced, it was a combination of the NWA World Championship. I'm sorry, the NWA National Television Championship,
Right.
from Georgia Championship Wrestling, not GCW like we know it, those
Yeah,
initials now.
GCW. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was Georgia Championship Wrestling, but also from the television championship from Atlantic Championship. And it's
Hmm.
crazy because when we start talking about some of these names, let me just do this. You can't really talk about those names until you talk about this belt. So let's
Yeah.
start there because Tully Blanchard is listed as a person that had the most reigns with it, right?
Yep.
And this belt itself was the mold for so many different belts. And when I say the mold, when you look at this belt, you will see it has things, for the time, TV stations and things like that. The TV
Yep.
camera, because a lot of these things were shot in studios. The
Hmm.
wrestling ring at the bottom, very clean, unique design. It's got the eagle at the top, the NWA banner,
Right.
same thing over here, a satellite dish because it was on broadcast television, and the
Hmm.
NWA banner, right?
Yep.
But
Real classic look. Real classic look.
and it's crazy because you say a classic look. There were so many other belts. Well, let's back up. Before we talk about NWA, it's a very good tidbit that not a lot of people may not know. NWA was not a wrestling promotion at first.
No.
It was an entity that controlled the territories.
Yeah.
So they had a bunch of different territories, right? But
Yep.
this belt was one of those that's been carbon copied, it's been cut and paste, right? So
Hmm.
let's talk about some of the names because from 84 to 87, Tully Blanchard, The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and Arn Anderson.
Arn Anderson, double A.
So I'm gonna switch on you, right? Because when we talk about Arn Anderson, you got to talk about this version. I'm
Oh
sorry,
yeah.
I got to just talk about
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's it.
So, and then you add Ric Flair into the mix. Tell me about being somebody from a historical person from the actual territories. What was the significance of this belt before we get to the 10 pounds of gold?
Well, because the NWA champion was always on the road a lot of times and doing profile matches in different territories, you needed somebody who could hold the showdown for you. And whoever had that belt was the man who was going to be in the main event. He was a great worker, someone who could also talk the talk and walk the walk, as they say. So, like you said, a front man like Tully Blanchard. Tully, he that was I you know what, to me that was his belt because he always had it. You know, it
But
seemed
see, I
like.
remember Arn because he had the rhythm. I feel like
Yeah,
this is the Arn Anderson belt. And if you're in the
yeah.
comments, just tell me, do you associate Arn with this or do you associate Dusty with this? Because this is literally, to me, the Arn Anderson. Because we could talk about Tully had it 3 times, 685 days. Dusty had
Yeah,
it 3 times, 227 days. And these are
right,
all combined reigns. Arn only had it 1 time for 248 days. And by the
yeah,
numbers, I would say it was Arn's belt because in 1 time he had a quarter of the reign that somebody had three, right? But
right.
we did a show with this before, and he was going to laugh when I say this because Martin said it. I was going to allude to that. Does the
Yeah,
strap
that,
matter
yeah,
on this
man.
belt?
That, yes, it does, man. It pops. It pops.
But what about it? Because when Arn held it, and it kept flip flop from black to red, right? And did the strap mean more to somebody that was holding it? Because if they were the person in that territory, did it matter if it was a red strap or black strap?
um, Me personally, I think it could only be like if a red strap like Arn Anderson when he had it, he was a heel. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard for me to answer that actually, but I think it can only go with certain people. You know what I'm saying? Like when they, for instance, when they did Ric Flair when he got the big gold belt, and you saw the color it had on it, and for he was stylish, so he had the swagger. You know, he was Flair had the charisma and all that, so that belt stood out. It was made. It was like it was made for him. You know what I'm saying? So when he presented it, so I think some people, Arn Anderson wore red trunks. You know what I'm
But that's
saying?
when he was running with the Four Horsemen
Yeah,
because
when
didn't
he was
they?
running with the Horsemen.
It was some shenanigans for him to get the belt because didn't they beat
Oh
down
yeah.
Dusty for this
Oh
belt?
yeah.
So I if you remember this in the comments, anybody in the comments, I believe it was Dusty had chased it, he had got it back, and then Arn was the next man up, right? Because a lot
Hmm.
of times with this belt, this was always the next person. Because a lot of times on those marquees, you would have the smaller mid card, the opening match, but then the main event will be huge on the bottom, right? And you would
Right.
see the progression of somebody might have started at the top, now they're in the mid, and this is the main event, right?
Hmm.
So with this, would you say that when Arn held it as a heel, it made it more prominent than when Dusty held it as a face?
I think the belt was prominent when Dusty had it because Dusty was such a star.
Okay.
During that time, Dusty was one of the biggest stars in wrestling. One of the three biggest names. You had Hogan, of course. You had Flair. You had Dusty Rhodes, American Dream. So for R to get that belt, it did like it kind of what's the word? It gave him that rub he needed. Okay, he's a made guy because this Dusty had this. You know what I'm saying? So back then, when you had if you was in one of these territories that we're talking about, and you had one of these belts, like I said, that means you was somebody who was being built around. You might wasn't the man yet, but hey, you're next in line. So, it's a building. We're going to give you this title, the TV title, to see if you can carry it. And then when it's time to move on to the next title, you know what I'm saying? Hey, you're ready.
And like Mike said, he said the AA, I mean the red belt is Arn Anderson. And I don't know if because like for my generation, catching the tail end of it, I just
Hmm.
remember seeing Arn Anderson with that red belt. So it felt like it was his belt because certain belts become that person. And it's
Right.
crazy because in '87, it got unified again with the UWF championship. But
UWF. Yep.
yep. So now we had almost four belts combined to this one because we keep unifying it because remember, NWA is just in charge of the territories, not necessarily the company. But
Hmm.
when Jim Crockett Promotions, like you alluded to, when WCW brought it, in '89, which is a fun fact, in Baltimore, Maryland, Sting had to vacate the belts in Great Muta, right?
Hmm.
But by '91, we saw that this belt became something that we talked about on WCW belts, the television title, right?
Hmm.
And the prestige and the lineage kept going. So we got to see the great start there and move into the 10 pounds of gold. WCW kind of tried to take that formula where you had, let me just say, a Booker T with the television title. And then it's like, okay, he's going to move to the big gold. So they kind of took the same format to who's the next man up, right?
Right.
Because here's the thing about NWA, and we're going to get to the meat of this, right? So I call it the grandfather of all belts because I feel like the television title was the grandfather of the mid belts, right? So NWA was a governing body. We know that, right? We had all these different territories, right? We had
Right.
all these different cookie cutters of these plates, right?
Right.
The first champion on record for not necessarily holding the 10 pounds of gold, but the first world champion of the National Wrestling Association was Luthez, right? And
Yep.
if you look, this is what's crazy. We can see the evolution of a belt, right?
He had the belt for a long time too.
But I want you to see this picture because I want you to identify if this is the correct NWA world title. Give me 1 second. We're gonna bring it on screen, right? There's Luthez, right? The wrestler, right? This
Hmm.
man, um, this belt has so much. I don't want to say this belt has so much history and lineage that we saw as part of like how the Triple Crown title was made. We see different elements of it, like the ROH belt was modeled after this. You see a lot of elements, right? But Luthez, he was only recognized as the first NWA World Champion because the National Wrestling Alliance Association and the National Wrestling Alliance and Los Angeles Olympic World Heavyweight Championship, all three of those titles combined to make the NWA World title, right?
Right.
Was this the start of something great, making Luther as that person?
I think so because during those times, if you was a champion, you had to be a shooter, as they would call it back in the day. That means he could stretch it. This was a guy that could really wrestle. You know what I'm saying? They weren't putting the belts on just anybody. Like you had no substance. You had to know how to go basically. And Luthez had, you know, he was world renowned basically in the world of wrestling. Hold on, sorry. Okay, yeah, sorry. He was world renowned. Hello.
Sorry, is that better?
Oh yeah. Okay. All
Okay,
right.
yeah, go ahead. You're right. So you say he was world renowned.
Hmm. He was world renowned. He could, like I said, he was a real shooter. He could, and um, he was where he came from in the areas he wrestled were like top territories as well. So when all these promoters were coming together and they decide, okay, who's going to get the belt now and what dates or we're going to get them and this, that, and the third. You know, it was a pecking order, of course. That's one of the problems that the uh, promoters had. Even though you just see guys leave and come back, leave, come back, and stuff like that. That was always a problem because they couldn't trust each other. They were all crooks. Let's be real.
So let me ask you. So now we had Luthez as the first champion, right? Which
Right
was probably, let's call it what it is. He probably was the best wrestler
at
at
the
that
time.
time, most noticeable, selling out shows on the marquee. His name is synonymous with anything wrestling, right?
Yeah,
They even got a move named on the Luthez Press, right?
yeah.
But when you start to evolve the championship and then you start to see So here's the thing, and I'm not going to go with dates because I'm horrible with dates, but here's what happened with the NWA. All these territories, right? They came
Mm-hmm.
together, made the championship. Luthez is recognized as the first champion. AWA says, "Hey, I want to do this." NWA said no. AWA said, "That's fine. We're gonna make our own championship, right?"
Yep.
So
Yep.
now you got a split. After you done combined them, AWA makes their world champion, right?
Yep.
So then we see this happen constantly in history, even to the point that how many times did another territory say, "Nope, I want my own champion," because all these people that were proving themselves with these secondary titles, like the television, and now becoming world champion or vying to be the world champion. I'm in Georgia. I can't be the world champion because I can't. My promoter can't because the one in Massachusetts is. Talk to us
Mm-hmm.
about that. How did these territories start making these different world titles?
Well, and you're right. That's what started happening. Like for instance, in Mid South, uh, uh, Bill Watts, he went and made his own championship because he left the NWA at one point. Jared Promotions, Jared's dad, he had left, and that's when because they would, even though Lawler got to go against Harley Race, Jack Briscoe, because they was bringing him up forward to see if he could be the man to carry that. And Jerry Lawler was selling out every night in Memphis and in in Kentucky and all the different territories that was a part of that, and they couldn't get it, so they did the Southern heavyweight title. That's the title that they made up.
The Southern
Uh,
Heavyweight Championship,
yeah,
right? The
yeah.
oval one that was. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's it.
I knew
Nick,
exactly when you said that.
yeah, like you said, the AWA, Nick Gulas and them, they went and did their own thing. Um, the Sheik, the original Sheik, he stayed with the NWA, even though they were screwing him over too. But that's another story. but um, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I'm rambling. What was the? Say that question one more
No, you're
time.
good because that is a segue. You touched
Mm-hmm,
on how all these other championships came, but I'm gonna
mm-hmm,
throw a monkey wrench because I started with the television title for a reason because that was the who's who of professional wrestling, right?
right.
When this gentleman held Sweet Charlotte or 10 pounds ago, whatever you want to call it, right? Because I think he christened the name Sweet Charlotte, didn't he? This who we talking about right here. This man right here, right?
Yes, sir.
Styling and profiling, the way that
Profiling.
you're supposed to hold the belt when you're not coming to the ring, right?
You see how Cody holds
I,
it.
I wasn't going to say it. I'm glad you said it. But when Ric Flair became the NWA World Champion, this is during, when NWA was really putting their stamp on things as being, this is who it is. Was Flair the right person to show that I am the world champion out of all these other territories? Was Flair the right person? Because remember, when he held this, it brought eyes to the product because of all the work he had been doing in every single territory.
He was the right man for the job.
Oh,
For several reasons. For one, before he even came to Crockett Promotions, Chief Wahoo McDaniel was the one that told Crockett about him when he was over in wait a minute, the Central State.
mid
I
so
can't remember. Yeah, and Flair when he came in, even though he had the Nature Boy thing going, Flair was different. You know, when he coming in with the nice suits, tailored suits, the pinky ring, the beach blonde hair, and women had loved Flair back in the day. Let's be honest. If you look at those shows back in the day and you look at the crowd, it was probably 65 women and 35% men in the crowds. You know what I'm saying? But Flair was box office. He was boast, braggadocious, and talking about the money, the cars, the money, and he the dirtiest player in the game. And Flair was going around the town, around the country, and he was putting on these 60-minute matches that were at that time stellar. You know what I'm saying? So he had to talk, he had to walk, and he backed it up. Come on, man, he was perfect for it. And some of those other guys that the NWA was counting on, they were getting older. You know what I'm saying? Harley didn't have it anymore. You know, he was starting to. He wasn't growing up. He was growing out. You know what I'm saying? but
You say he was growing out, he wasn't growing up.
yeah, he was growing out, and you know some of those. That's why the newer guys had to come in, and Flair was that guy. That was that
So
guy.
I'm gonna say this because, and I'm gonna keep saying grandfather belts because even NWA got tired of this belt and introduced the big gold, right? So we
Right.
had the big gold, went to WCW, went to WWF for a little bit, as in Flair took it as the Real World Champion. We know about that story. It came
Hmm.
back as the Vegas big gold, but it wasn't the actual one with the lineage. Then it came back to WCW. Then they merged it. It became the big gold again. WCW folded. It's gone, right? And I
Right.
know I probably gave about 20 years of history in like 2 minutes, right? But
Right.
I want to get to this point that Justin said, he says, I feel like I learned something tonight. My first exposure to the 10 pounds ago was early in '04 TNA, which
Oh
a
wow.
lot of fans were starting to see what is this belt, right? Because
Right.
when the belt, let me just put it on my shoulder. When this belt debuted, right? Not
Right.
debuted, but when TNA was a thing, you mentioned somebody, right?
Hmm.
Um, in TNA, Jeff Jarrett and his dad said, we're going to start a promotion, right?
Right.
Under the NWA banner, right? And our world champion would be the NWA TNA World Heavyweight Champion, right? And this is the
Right.
belt that we saw.
Hmm.
When this belt came into a new promotion, did it feel as prestigious as it used to?
Well, with me knowing the history, I was actually shocked when I saw it, and I think what Jeff was going for was like, okay, because this is a southern territory anyway. So they're like, okay, these are the people who's probably going to watch this. So they're going to know this belt. They're going to know the NWA. I think they were using that as kind of a catapult to help them grow their business at the beginning. I think that's what that was for.
But let's talk about that because if that's the case, who's holding the belt should matter, right?
Of course.
All right. So when you talk about that, like think about in the earlier stages, right? Who was the
Hmm.
first person to hold the NWA TNA belt? Let me test the knowledge. I'm gonna see if anybody in the comments remember. Let's throw it out there because I want to see if they remember. Mm. Do 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 do. Are you googling it? He's googling it. All right. So while Dennis tries to get that answer, right? So this was during a time, and while he's doing it, I'm gonna distract you a little bit if I can find the belt. And as we don't want to have dead air because here we go. During the time, this was the secondary title, right? And NWA TNA, right? And then
Hmm.
we had this as our world champion, right? I think you want to put it on somebody that you don't pay attention to this
Right.
because this is going to draw your attention. No
Yeah,
matter
that's
who's holding this, you're going to say, well, what are they doing? Why is there a
yeah,
big red X on it, right? So for those
yeah,
that don't know, this
exhibition.
is the NWA TNA X Division title. While they were under the TNA banner, while they were under the NWA banner, they made their secondary title was the X Division, right?
Right.
So the first person to hold it under the TNA promotion was who? Who was it? Did you find it?
Under the TNA.
Yeah, under the TNA banner. Do you remember? Think about
Uh,
back in the day, right? Who was the?
I'm,
You're probably going to say AJ. Most people think it was AJ Styles,
yeah, I was gonna say AJ, but
but who did AJ defeat? That's the other thing. He
wasn't
was
it
a
Jeff?
former WWE guy. I'll give you that. He was a former WWE guy.
Kurt Angle. No, he wasn't.
No, he came
No, he
later.
wasn't. Yeah, he came later. It was
If
Jeff.
memory serves, nope, it was Ken Shamrock.
Oh, how did I forget that? How did I forget
So,
that?
and I was a TNA guy, and I'm gonna say this: you should have put it on your main event player to bring this to. And I don't know if y'all can see this. I am missing a stone. Hence, on one of the
Yeah.
shows, I talk about how I hate stones on belts. But
Uh,
you know, people
you're not the
remember
only. You're not the only one, buddy.
we in the same group. So it felt like it was a okay. This is who we're going to back, right? We have this whole lineage of the 10 pounds of gold, right? And I'm gonna tell you this: the one thing that stood out to me when this was in TNA, I just want to show you something. Watch this because this is the one thing that stood out in TNA during the time of this belt. And I just want you to watch this quick video because this should bring you back to a certain point in time.
To the
Let me
back,
see if we
that's
can.
great. It's back down to the two men in this match. Kind of a variation of a diamond cutter there by the Truth. It is. He got him with it. Two. And he beat him away. He beat him away. The winner of the match. And new NWA Heavyweight Champion of the world, Ron the Truth Killing.
The move that he calls the truth or consequences. He dropped Ken Shamrock down, and he did it. He did it. The Truth is the NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
He can walk the walk. The Truth can talk the talk. He can walk the walk. This moment right here in time. This is the moment of truth. Ron the
Not once, but twice, right? He's credited as being an NWA World Champion, right? And credited as being the first black NWA World Heavyweight Champion. So if you wasn't going to put it on a major star, put it on a major moment like that. And to me, that brought some eyes because whenever you talk about the first of anything, it's always going to want people to say, "Oh, what are they doing over there?" Right?
Right.
But then we had people that, when I say held the title, did it make it more prestigious or did it make it less? Because we can. I gotta stop what I'm saying for that one. So he said his brother
Yeah.
has age. I'm pretty sure, and you see that he look exactly the same
Yeah,
now
yeah.
as he did back then, right? So the point I'm trying to make, yes, that was definitely truth. He was when he left WWE, he was K Quick at first, and then he became Ron Killings there, and then he came back as R Truth. So he had three different names. A lot of people might only know him as R Truth, but yeah, that was he left, and he has actually a really interesting story how he wound up in wrestling. But let's talk about the TNA run real quick, right? So you had AJ Styles, Jeff Jarrett, R Truth, Raven. Did Rhino hold it? I can't remember if Rhino held it. I feel like I feel like Rhino might have held it, but you had these former guys. But it wasn't until Christian held it because he took down the Ultimate Hill. It felt like it was a little bit more prestigious, right?
Raven,
Do
Raven
you?
did have it. Yeah.
Raven did.
Yeah.
Okay.
hmm
Did they elevate their own stock by being NWA World Champion, or did it just say check off the box? I was a world champion.
With a couple of those guys, I think it was a check in the box to say, hey, he, because you got me with that one.
All right.
Or
And
just, like for
because well,
instance,
let me reverse. Let me rewind you, right?
okay,
Because remember, WCW had it, right?
hmm
They basically said no, we want our own title. They went out. ECW had it. They said no, we want Shane Douglas had it, right? They said nope, he's the ECW champions. Forget this belt. Now
right,
TNA is trying to do something with it, but was it really worth it? Because you had a person that was never world champion in WWE, but now he has it. You had all
right,
these former wasn't ever, and they're getting that first run because from Ken Shamrock, R Truth, Jeff Jarrett, AJ Styles. Um, I'm trying to remember who had it after that. Jeff, AJ,
Run,
I think Jeff did Christian because I know it was a lot of trading back and forth
right,
between
yeah,
Jeff
the
Jarrett
black,
people.
yeah, because you got to remember Ron Killings, AJ Styles, and Jeff went back and forth almost like
Yeah, for a while.
2004.
And it
Yeah,
was like you throw the mix, but when Christian held it, I think Christian had something to prove, right? So it
yeah,
felt like it was back in those days where I had been this mid card champion, and now I have something to prove as
right,
a world champion. And they put
right,
their company on the back. They had the biggest prize in wrestling history, not just in
yeah,
TNA, but in wrestling history. And they're showing you, hey, look what I can do. I'm a world
right.
champion in this company, right?
Christian was good for it because he came with some cachet. You know what I'm saying? From being in one of the best tag teams with Ed and Christian and some of the work he did with WWE. So he brought some some cachet with it. You know what I'm saying? So I see why he got the belt as well. And then if you look at the names that we said, all those guys were WWE guys. You know what I'm saying? So people knew them. So yeah, we got this young talented guy AJ Styles here, but nobody knows him yet. So let's put it on. You know, he has this guy here. He got the reputation. He's known. Boom. Let's put it on him. That's what a lot of companies do. We see it going on today in another company, but I ain't gonna talk about that.
But I'm gonna just say this: don't forget Sting, Abyss, and then it became end up yet again. TNA said we want our own because NWA was like, "This is what you're supposed to do," and they were like, "No, this is what we're gonna do." Right. So now we see the NWA belt disappear again. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It resurfaced again under the National Wrestling Alliance, but now under pro wrestling, and that's what we start to see. The Raw general manager Adam Pearce with the belt, right? And they went on and said that Adam Pearce and Nick Aldis were former NWA champions, right? So now I feel like the belt kind of takes a back seat because it's not on a major promotion. Because now it's only seen in certain instances, right? And then we see where Adam Pearce, we know he tried. He tried so bad to keep that thing going, right? But it wasn't until the TV deal in 16 when we saw this almost like, all right, let's put it back on a national scale. Let's put it back in front of people's face. But it wasn't until Nick Aldis held it, and with his historic reign, his first reign,
Yeah.
which was great because he left that Magnus persona and now he became Nick Aldis, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had that reign. We know he dropped it to Cody for reasons. And I'm always
Political.
I'm always a person. As long as you hold it for 1 minute, you're a world champion,
You're a
right?
champion. Yeah.
But then he had a 1,043-day reign with this belt. Was that enough to put some prestige back into it?
I think so. Because when I first saw Nick Aldis, I was like, "Who's this big dude?" you know, and he looked credible. He looked credible. You know, sometimes presentation and look plays a big part in wrestling. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And he
And remember,
looked
you
like
said that presentation because
yeah.
that's something we're gonna hit on. You
Oh
said it.
yeah.
You said just remember you said that. And ladies and gentlemen, I didn't say it. He said it. He said presentation looks a big part.
Yeah,
All right.
presentation plays a big part. And Nick, he had that beautiful wife as well, you know. But that's another story. But yeah, I think Nick did play. He had it for like what 1,000 something days.
At the 1,040, I think it was 43, right?
Oh yeah, like man, that
1,043
was
or 42. It was 40. Was it 43? 1043, I think it was. Don't quote me on that. But it was
okay.
because it was after his first reign of almost a year. We knew going into was it All In the pre AEW show. We knew Cody was going to get it because you got to have that check in history, right?
Yeah.
So then we have a thing where when you talk about presentation, right? I'm not discrediting his work, but the next couple of champions kind of goes like this. We get these ebbs and flows, right?
Oh
So
my God.
Trevor Murdoch gets it. And we were like, okay, maybe they're trying to do something different.
Yeah, you know.
But then Matt Cardona gets it, and now he has the Christian effect where it's like, watch me take this company and put it on my back, right?
Mm-hmm.
But was Matt Cardona, was it too late for him to get that world title? Because he was already on his run as the indie guy. Was that too late for him?
I think so. Because like you said, he was already doing something else. And then boom. It
Because he was hot, he'd give him the belt.
and like it's like, man, come on, man. It's like you're messing with my emotions almost. Like, come on, man. You know,
Like, because he was the indie god and he was doing everything. It was like,
he had like what 12 belts almost, you know, and all of a sudden, let's just put it on this guy. Yeah.
So it got vacated.
Mm-hmm.
Trevor Murdoch got it back. You talked about presentation. We can't not talk about this belt without. Oh Lord, I'm gonna hold the belt up because it's a. the belt looks like a sloth. First off, and I'll never
Yeah.
forget that somebody said it looks like a sloth. Um, but before I get to the point I'm trying to make, it's been different versions of the belt, different ways to display the flags and everything like that. Mine has Jeff Jarrett's signature on it,
Wow,
um, and
nice,
then I have Nick Aldis' signature on it, right? Which
nice.
kind of people that you might default in this day and age and say, but I think people default and say Tyrus for the wrong reasons.
Oh.
All right, your reaction was enough for me, and now we're sitting with
Oh.
EC3 as the champion, right?
I don't
I'm
I
going to
don't
just say
mind EC3, but did you see that match between EC3 and Tyrus?
all I'm gonna say this. I guess he's controlling his narrative. All right, so
Good one.
so I do want to hit on one other thing about this 10 pounds of gold, right? When the design was changing for this belt, right? It
Hmm.
was so unique because we had that cookie cutter of the television belt, right? With the television belt, now you had a whole different design that the flags are the side pieces, right?
Right.
Did this belt appeal to be a world championship more than just having a globe?
I think for the time, no. When it first came out, I think so. It was for that time. It was good, but now that we were in, you're talking with like the 2010s. You know what I'm saying? It's the classic belt. It's the Godfather of belts to me. But I think for that time, you needed something more, especially like okay, for instance, when you had the big X division belt. That's a good looking belt. You know what I'm
This one,
saying? Yeah, and like if you don't know if you're just watching wrestling, you don't know which belt is the championship belt and which one is the X. You would think that's the number one belt when you first look at if you don't know about belts.
but see, I always looked at it as like this is the pay attention to me championship because it was trying
Exactly.
to tell people pay it because you could know what a big gold is, and then you're going to recognize the 10 pounds of gold, right? You're going to recognize that belt when you see it because as a casual wrestling fan, that's what you saw Ric Flair with, that's what you saw
Hmm.
Dusty with, that's what you saw these greats with. So
Right.
now in a new promotion, you got that nice shiny toy. You have this one, and even the tag belt was the NWA tag belt, right? And
Right.
it's crazy because I think the belt's ready for a facelift. The big gold
Right.
has had iterations, has had different versions. The only difference has been with this belt is the side plates, how the flags are positioned, which flags they are. Which way do you do the Australian flag? Is it the Great Britain flag? Is it the how you do the Japanese? At one point, I think it was like in 16, it came out the side plates at NWA on top of each of them.
Right.
So it just depends on what it is, but it's a basic design, and this is probably everybody has a story. But when you break down the design of this belt, yeah, it looks like a sloth mouth, two two jewels on the top.
Hmm.
Some iterations heavyweight was spelled wrong, so the E and the I was switched. Remember, certain
Ooh.
time, yeah. If you go back and look at certain ones, heavyweight was
Hmm.
spelled wrong. Some of them,
Hmm.
this was more popping out than others, and then the United States flag is always on the side, but you got the classic grapplers, right?
Right.
Rope edge, and then basic side plates to say, hey, look who it is, look what country.
Yeah.
And the braiding around it makes it stand out more.
Hmm.
But I think that's where we end with the NWA because it's still around today, as in the NWA World Championship, and NWA
Right.
is actually recognized as its own separate promotion, right? So with all of the lineage, I'm gonna ask you this: what was your standout moment with the 10 pounds of gold? Watching wrestling in the territories.
Ooh. It was actually a promo with Ric Flair. He did, and he came out with his glasses on and nice suit, and he had been busted open. I think he was. It was during the time when he was going in it with Wahoo McDaniel, and he cut a promo on Wahoo, and Wahoo got so mad, and Wahoo beat him, like stripped him naked almost and beat him bad. That was a moment. Hey,
So I asked right, and you told me.
yeah.
So, who's your favorite wrestler to hold it? And you can go ahead and say Ric Flair again, because I know that's probably what it is.
It's Flair.
I
It's
figured it was
definitely
Flair.
Flair.
That's crazy. And
My
is
great
this
aunt wanted to shoot him. Yeah,
okay?
she
Out
wanted
of
to shoot
all the
him.
wrestling history that we have, whether it's the Big Gold, Wing Eagle, um, because all right, let me reverse. Is this the most iconic belt?
I would say no.
Okay, I'm going to say
Okay.
yes, and this is why I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
This belt, when a belt gets a nickname, that's when it becomes iconic.
Mhm.
Because this belt has birthed so many other belts, it is iconic. Think about the WCW 91 and 94. It has a label, the Wing Eagle, the Big Eagle,
Right.
the Big Gold.
Right.
What other belt does really have the network logo belts? We don't say any other type of belt or having a nickname for it, unlike this one, right? So that's
Right.
why I say it's the most iconic because not only does it have a name, but it birthed so many other belts because of
Yeah, I
what
agree with that.
NWA
I
stood
agree.
for. And I
The
know
reason why
Dwayne's gonna have notes, and he's probably gonna tell me I'm crazy, but
the only reason why I and I said no is because it's some people still don't know about it because of when it was actually really being shown. You know what I'm saying? And even though that would like when WCW switched the belt and went to the Big Gold, and they was people didn't really get to see the 10 pounds of gold like that. Even though TNA brought it back, it wasn't nationwide like that. You know what I'm saying? That's the only reason why. But I agree with you that because if you look at the lineage of the NWA, that belt actually goes. Even though the NWA started in what the 63,
yeah, 62 or 63.
yeah, 63. The lineage goes all the way back to George Hackenschmidt in 1905. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was gonna say the first world champion. Like,
Yeah,
well, was it 1899 or 19? Remember the history books say it was two
yeah,
different dates because nobody was recognized as a world champion. It was just wrestling. Then they
right.
decided to let's make this the world
Hmm.
champion, and that's
Yeah,
who it was.
yeah,
But it
George
wasn't until
Hackenschmidt. Yeah,
they
yeah.
said let's combine these three, and here you go,
Hmm.
Luther has become the champion.
Right, right. Most definitely, most
So,
definitely.
well, I think we covered it. What else you got to say about the 10 pounds of gold? Because um, I think we hit it because somebody that knows the territory was able to fill in some blanks. Right, I had to throw the R truth in there because definitely got to say about that historic moment.
That's
Um,
a moment. That's a moment, man. And
mhm.
us as black men, outside of that, the only time we saw it was Ron Simmons on WCW.
And yep,
You know, and yeah, that's the only time. I mean, even though the Junkyard Dog was a champion in Mid South, you know that it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. You know what I'm saying? It
hmm,
wasn't the same because
gotcha.
with WCW was like a major thing, even though you didn't know it had all those problems going on. It was WWF and then WCW.
And every belt came because of nope, it birthed all the other belts.
Yeah.
So with that, brother, tell the people where they can find you at because they might not know where to find you at.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Dennis DL King, all one word, and also on Facebook, Dennis L King.
And I'm telling you, if you want to talk about a territory, you want to talk about some history, you want to hear some stuff about filling in some blanks about some stuff that you ain't know about any kind of wrestling
Oh
prior to
yeah.
1990.
Oh
That's what I'm
yeah.
gonna say. Prior to 1990, please hit them up
Yeah.
and don't forget to tune in on Wednesday for our flagship show of the Wrestle Around Now podcast at 10:30 p.m. And tune in every Tuesday. Or let me back up. Don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms and follow Championship Culture underscore on Instagram. He said he took us to school tonight. I'm glad we could, brother, and I appreciate you. I'm gonna just keep saying brother site because it slipped and I said his name earlier. but I'm gonna keep his wrestling name real tight. Thank you,
I
brother. We
want to,
appreciate it.
yeah, man. I want to thank y'all for, bringing me on, man. I've been wanting to come on for a while. You remember I had some problems a couple of weeks ago, but I'm doing much better now.
That's good.
And I'm glad I could come on and share some of this stuff with you, man. And I'll be glad to come back on again when you talk about some beautiful belts and stuff.
Oh, don't worry. Prototype, he'll be back in the comments lighting us up about AEW. So don't
Don't
forget,
get me started on the rant now, because I
that's a
can
whole
rant.
nother show. So don't forget, you can tune in every Tuesday to Championship Culture at 8 p.m. And where we like to say, every belt has a story. And I can't wait to hear yours.